I parked my car at the trailhead, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows over the trees. This was supposed to be her solo hike. The one she needed for clarity. The one she didn't want me on because it was too steep. Jessica was up there. And she wasn't alone. I stepped out of the car, gravel crunching under my shoes, my mind racing through every sign I had ignored. The weird text messages. The sudden obsession with working out. The overnight stays at Stacy's when I could hear male laughter in the background of our rushed calls. I walked up the trail, my breath sharp in the cool evening air. I wasn't even supposed to be here. I had told Jessica I had a late meeting. But something in my gut had screamed at me to check. Something deep and ugly that had been eating at me for weeks. And then I heard them. Laughter. Hers. That bright, musical laugh she used when she was completely comfortable, when she was with someone she wanted to impress. Then a male voice. Deep. Familiar. Too familiar. I stepped closer, careful not to snap a branch or make a sound. The trees thinned just enough for me to see them. Jessica and him. Brad. Brad, her EX-FWB. Brad. The guy she swore was just a friend. The guy she told me had zero chemistry with her now. Brad standing way too close. His hand on her waist. His mouth near her ear as he whispered something that made her laugh. And then I saw it. Jessica reached up, her fingers curling around his wrist. Her body leaning into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she had done it 100 times. Like she belonged there. My stomach twisted. My vision blurred. My mind went blank with a rage so white-hot I almost stumbled forward right then and there. But I didn't. I pulled out my phone, heart hammering, hands steady despite the storm inside me. I hit record, because Jessica wasn't just cheating. She was using him. And I was about to find out just how deep the betrayal ran. I stood there, my phone steady in my grip, capturing every second of her betrayal. Every touch, every stolen glance, every moment she thought she was safe, wrapped up in the arms of a man she swore meant nothing to her. Jessica was smiling. That soft, teasing smile she used when she wanted something. When she wanted me to buy into her lies. But this time it wasn't for me. It was for him. Brad said something I couldn't hear, and she playfully shoved his chest, her fingers lingering a little too long. Then she leaned in, close enough that their noses almost touched. I saw the way he looked at her, the way his hands hovered just a second before grabbing her hips like it was second nature. And that was it. That was all I needed. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, turned around, and walked away before I did something I'd regret. My pulse was a roaring drum in my ears. My hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. My body was moving, but my mind was somewhere else. Somewhere between blind rage and devastating clarity. This wasn't just some random fling. It wasn't a one-time mistake. This was something else. By the time I got back to my car, my breathing was shallow, my vision tunneling as the truth hit me full force. Jessica hadn't accidentally fallen into Brad's arms. She had chosen him, again and again. And what made it worse? She wasn't just cheating on me. She and her friends had been using him. I don't know why that part hit me harder than anything else. Maybe because it meant she had been laughing about this behind my back. Maybe because it proved that every excuse, every deflection, every little lie she told me over the past few months was deliberate, calculated. I forced myself to breathe, forced myself to think. I needed to know everything, so I called Stacy, Jessica's best friend. The one who was always a little too quick to cover for her. The one who conveniently forgot details whenever Jessica's stories didn't add up. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, what's up? I didn't waste time. Where's Jessica right now? A pause. A tiny hesitation. At home, I think? Bulls ****. I let the silence stretch, waiting. Letting her feel the weight of the lie. And sure enough, she cracked first. Wait, why? What's going on? I almost laughed. Almost. But instead, I said the words I knew would shake her. I know everything, Stacy. And just like that, the game changed. The silence on the line stretched so long I almost thought she hung up. But then a sharp inhale, like she was scrambling to figure out how much I actually knew. Stacy had always been the kind of person who could lie without blinking, but now there was hesitation. A crack. And I was about to rip it open. What do you mean? She said, voice tight. I almost smiled. Almost? Cut the crap, Stacy. I saw them. Nothing. No denial. No gaslighting. Just silence. Then, finally, a quiet, oh. Oh? That was it? That one syllable, that single breath of realization told me everything. Stacy knew. She'd always known. And worse? She wasn't surprised that I knew now. I exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel as I leaned back in my seat, trying to keep my voice level. How long? Stacy hesitated again. How long? A long sigh crackled through the speaker. A few months. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. My fingers tightened around the wheel until my knuckles burned. Months. Jessica hadn't just slipped up. This wasn't a mistake. This was routine. Stacy cleared her throat like she was bracing for impact. Look, I wasn't gonna say anything, but what? I snapped, my patience snapping with it. But you helped her? You covered for her? She didn't answer. Didn't have to. Because she knew I was right. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Unbelievable. So what? You and the girls just watched this happen? Cheered her on. No. She rushed out. But then she hesitated. I mean, not exactly. It's not what you think. I scoffed. Oh, it's exactly what I think. Stacy groaned. Frustrated. Look, Brad was just... She cut herself off like she realized she was about to say too much. I latched onto it instantly. Just what? Nothing. That silence again. That hesitation. And suddenly I knew. Jessica hadn't just been screwing around with Brad. Brad was a stand-in. A sick feeling curdled in my stomach. She used him, didn't she? Stacy didn't answer, but I heard her sharp inhale. That was all the confirmation I needed. Jessica and her friends hadn't just encouraged her to cheat. They had orchestrated it. Used Brad as some kind of backup plan. A convenient, disposable option for when she wanted attention. And the worst part? He didn't even know. My entire body went cold. This wasn't just betrayal. This was humiliation. I had spent months thinking I was losing my mind, doubting myself, trusting her lies, while she was out here treating another man like a side dish and laughing about it with her friends. I exhaled slowly, my rage so sharp it felt almost controlled now. Tell Jessica she's got about 10 minutes to get home, I said, my voice eerily calm. Stacy's breath caught. Dude, I hung up before she could finish. Then I threw the car into drive. It was time to end this. I drove home in complete silence. No music. No distractions. Just the sound of my tires grinding against the pavement and the sharp, focused rhythm of my own breathing. My hands were steady on the wheel now, no shaking, no hesitation. The rage was still there, burning deep in my chest, but it wasn't the kind that made you reckless. It was the kind that made you dangerous. Jessica had 10 minutes. I was giving her exactly that. When I pulled into the driveway, her car wasn't there. Not surprising. She was probably still on the trail, still with him, still believing she was untouchable. I stepped inside the house and took a slow look around. The living room spotless. The framed wedding photo still hanging above the fireplace. The scent of her perfume faint in the air. A home built on a lie. I walked to the bedroom and opened her closet. My fingers traced the designer bags she had begged me for, the dresses she had worn to date nights where she stared at her phone more than at me. And then at the back, something caught my eye. A box. Not just any box, that box. The one I had never seen before. I pulled it out, set it on the bed, and lifted the lid. Inside, neatly stacked, were old letters. Notes. Little mementos from a past she swore was dead. From Brad. I picked up the top letter, my pulse slow and heavy, and unfolded it. The handwriting was rushed, messy. Like a younger version of him had written it in a hurry. Jess, you know I'd drop everything for you. Just say the word. I exhaled through my nose, flipping through more of them. Notes that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a new affair. Brad had always been there. Jessica had never really let him go. The front door swung open downstairs. I stood up, placing the box on the bed, and turned just as Jessica walked into the house, her steps hurried. Babe, she called, her voice just a little too high, a little too off. She knew. Not everything. Not yet. But she felt it. That prickle at the back of her neck, the shift in the air when you walk into a room and realize the game is over. I stepped into the hallway just as she looked up and saw me. Her smile flickered. Hey, you're home early, where were you? I asked, my voice calm. Too calm. Her mouth opened. Then closed. Then opened again. I told you. Hiking. I nodded slowly, watching her. Letting the silence drag. She swallowed. Why are you looking at me like that? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and played the video. The second she heard Brad's voice, she went pale. The second she saw herself leaning into him, she froze. I let it play until the end. Then I locked the screen and slid the phone back into my pocket. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Jessica blinked rapidly, her mouth opening like she was about to spin a story. But I beat her to it. You lied to me. My voice was quiet, but the weight behind it was enough to make her flinch. Wait, she said quickly, holding up her hands. Just let me explain. Explain what, Jessica? I took a step closer. Explain how you've been screwing around with him for months? Or how you and your friends turned him into some pathetic stand-in while you laughed behind his back? Which one is it? Her breath hitched. I wasn't, you weren't what? I cut in. You weren't cheating? Because I saw you. You weren't lying? Because I have proof. She shook her head, her bottom lip trembling. It's not what you think. I let out a slow, bitter laugh. That's funny. Because what I think is that my wife is a lying, cheating snake. And what I know is that I'm done with you. Her face crumpled. No, wait. Just let me talk. No, I stepped back, my voice final. I don't need to hear another word out of your mouth. She reached for me, but I moved before she could touch me. She wasn't crying yet. She was still in damage control mode, still searching for an angle, a way to twist this back in her favor. But there was no way out this time. And she knew it. Jessica's entire body stiffened. Her smile faltered for half a second before she forced it back, too bright, too fake. I could see the gears turning in her head, calculating, trying to read my expression, trying to figure out what I knew. I didn't say a word. I just leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her like she was a stranger who had just broken into my house. She laughed soft, breathy, forced. Okay, why are you looking at me like that? I still didn't answer. She shifted on her feet, reaching for her bag like she was about to walk past me. I need a shower. I was out there for hours, yeah, I cut in smoothly, my voice eerily calm. I bet you were. Jessica stopped. A flicker of something flashed across her face, too fast for most people to catch, but I wasn't most people. Not anymore. What's that supposed to mean? She said, tilting her head, feigning confusion. I let the silence drag. Let her sit in it. Then I pulled my phone out of my pocket, turned it around, and pressed play. Jessica's laugh. Brad's voice. The sound of her telling him, God, it's so much easier with you. The color drained from her face. For the first time, she had no script. I watched as her lips parted, then closed. As her brain short-circuited trying to decide which approach to take, deny, cry, flip it on me, she went with option 3. Her expression hardened. Oh, so you spied on me? That's what we're doing now. I almost laughed. This was her defense? Yeah, I said, shoving my phone back in my pocket. I did. Because my wife was out in the woods dry humping her ex. Jessica flinched but recovered quickly, rolling her eyes. It's not what it looks like, don't. My voice was sharp enough to slice through steel. Don't insult my intelligence. I know everything. I took a step forward, watching her inhale sharply. I know about the texts. The group chat. How you and your friends turned Brad into some kind of pathetic backup plan. And I definitely know how you planned to drop me as soon as you were bored of playing house. Jessica's mouth opened, but no words came out. She was trapped. For the first time in our entire relationship, she had no way out. I leaned in just slightly, lowering my voice. So go on, Jess. Lie to me. She didn't. Because she couldn't. Instead, her jaw clenched, her eyes darting around the room like she was trying to find a way out. And then the shift happened the moment she realized there was nothing she could say to flip this. So she did what cowards do. She deflected. You know what? She threw her hands up, shaking her head. I'm not doing this. If you want to act like a crazy, insecure psycho, fine. But I don't have to stand here and take it. She grabbed her bag and turned toward the hallway. I let her get 2 steps before I dropped the bomb. Don't bother unpacking, I said coolly. You won't be staying here much longer. Jessica froze. Slowly, she turned back, her expression a perfect blend of shock and outrage. Excuse me. I pulled a stack of papers from the kitchen counter and tossed them onto the table. She stared at them. Then back at me. Then back down. Divorce papers. Her breath hitched. I already filed. Jessica's entire world cracked right in front of me. And I didn't feel a goddamn thing. Jessica stared at the divorce papers like they were some foreign language she couldn't understand. Like the concept of facing real consequences had never once crossed her mind. Her fingers twitched at her sides, her chest rising and falling unevenly. You're not serious. I didn't answer. I just watched as she struggled to process the fact that she wasn't the one in control anymore. Her lips parted, her voice pitching higher. You already filed? Yep. A breathless laugh escaped her, sharp and incredulous. Are you kidding me? She snatched the papers off the table, flipping through them like she expected to find a joke hidden somewhere in the text. You went behind my back and did this? I raised an eyebrow. Oh, now you care about things happening behind your back? Jessica's jaw tightened. For a split second, I could see the mask slipping, the panic creeping in. She wasn't just mad. She was scared. She never thought it would get to this point. And that's when I realized. She actually thought I would just take it. She thought I'd cry, scream, beg her to explain, let her feed me more lies so she could stay comfortable. But I wasn't giving her that. Jessica's fingers clenched around the papers. This is insane. You're acting like I don't know, like I murdered someone. I scoffed. Yeah. Because screwing around behind my back for months is totally normal, right? Her face twisted. I saw you, Jess. My voice was cold, steady. I saw everything. And I saw the messages. You didn't just cheat. You used Brad like a goddamn toy. And you mocked him for it. Jessica's nostrils flared. Oh, please. Don't act like Brad's some innocent victim. He wanted it. I didn't force him into anything. My stomach churned at the way she said it. So dismissive, so arrogant. Like people only existed to serve her needs. And me? I asked, tilting my head. Did I want it? Jessica blinked. I stepped closer, watching her swallow hard. Did I want to be lied to? Humiliated? Did I ask for that? Her lips parted. No words came out. And I saw it then, that tiny flicker of guilt before she buried it under her usual self-righteousness. I was unhappy, she blurted out. What was I supposed to do? You never listened to me. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. So your solution was to spread your legs for Brad and turn it into a group activity with your friends? Jessica flinched. For the first time, she was the one who looked embarrassed. But I wasn't done. You want to know the best part? I leaned in slightly, dropping my voice. Brad didn't even know you were using him. Did he? Jessica's mouth snapped shut. Bullseye. I smirked. Yeah, that's what I thought. She exhaled sharply, her fingers digging into her temples like she was the victim here. God, I cannot believe you're throwing our whole marriage away over this. I stared at her. And I realized something. She still didn't get it. She actually believed I'd hesitate. That I'd rethink this. That she could manipulate her way out, just like always. I stepped back, grabbed my jacket off the chair, and walked to the door. Jessica's head snapped up. Where are you going? I didn't look at her as I opened it. To have a conversation Brad deserves to hear. Jessica's face drained of all color. And for the first time in our entire relationship, she had no idea what to do. Jessica moved fast. Too fast. Before I could take a step out the door, she lunged forward, grabbing my wrist with both hands like a desperate drowning woman. No, she gasped. No, you're not doing that. I turned slowly and looked down at her hands, gripping me like I was the only thing holding her world together. Her breathing was uneven, her fingers digging into my skin. And in her eyes, for the first time all night, I saw real fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of me telling Brad. I ripped my arm away. Get your hands off me. Jessica stumbled back, but recovered quickly. You don't need to do this, she said, her voice shaking but her expression hardening. Just leave it alone. I let out a slow breath. Why? She blinked. What? Why do you care? I tilted my head, pretending to be curious. I mean, according to you, Brad wanted it, right? He knew what he was getting into, didn't he? Jessica flinched. And there it was. I let the silence stretch, watching as she really tried to come up with something, anything to spin this in her favor. But she wasn't fast enough. So I decided to help her out. He doesn't know, I said calmly. Does he? Jessica sucked in a sharp breath. I almost laughed. She really thought she could outplay me. I took another step toward the door. Don't wait up. Jessica panicked. Wait, please. She grabbed my sleeve this time, harder, yanking me back with enough force to throw herself off balance. She nearly fell, catching herself against the doorframe. And then, suddenly, she wasn't panicked anymore. She was pissed. She straightened up, eyes blazing, her breath coming fast. You're seriously gonna run to him? She spat, her voice dripping with disgust. What, you two gonna sit around and cry together? Have a little bro moment? I didn't take the bait. Didn't even blink. Because the truth was, her anger wasn't real. It was fear. I just stared at her, completely unmoved, while she clenched her fists like a petulant child. And then her voice turned cold. You know what? Fine. Go ahead. Tell him. She crossed her arms, lifting her chin. See if I care? I smirked. Oh, you care. Jessica's jaw twitched. You care a lot, I continued, watching her squirm. Because if you didn't, you wouldn't be standing here trying so hard to convince me not to. Jessica scoffed. Please. Brad's not gonna throw a tantrum like you. He gets me. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, yeah? Then why the hell haven't you left me for him? Her face flickered just for a second. A crack in the act. And suddenly I knew. She never planned to. Brad was just a temporary thrill. A safety net. A side piece to entertain her until she got bored again. And the second she did, she'd throw him away too. I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. You really are a piece of work. Jessica rolled her eyes. Oh, spare me, no, actually, I cut in sharply. I won't. She blinked, caught off guard by the shift in my tone. I leaned in slightly. You don't deserve to get away with this, Jess. You don't get to just move on like nothing happened. Brad may be an idiot, but he's still a human being. And I'm not gonna let you keep using him like he's disposable. Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she knew. She knew she had lost. And when I saw that final flicker of helplessness in her eyes, I smiled. Then, without another word, I walked out. And for the first time in our entire marriage, Jessica was the one left standing in the wreckage that I drove to Brad's place with a kind of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. Not because I wasn't angry, not because I wasn't disgusted, but because, for the first time, I was in control. Jessica had spent months pulling the strings, playing the victim, twisting reality to fit whatever narrative kept her comfortable. But now she was the one drowning, and I wasn't throwing her a lifeline. I pulled into Brad's driveway and killed the engine. His house was dark except for the faint glow of a TV flickering through the blinds. I sat there for a second, fingers drumming against the steering wheel, thinking about how I wanted to do this. Then, I stepped out and walked to the door. 3 sharp knocks, a pause, then muffled footsteps. When the door swung open, Brad squinted at me, confused. His hair was a mess, like he'd just woken up, and he was wearing a wrinkled hoodie that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. "Dude," he said, rubbing a hand down his face. "What the hell are you doing here?" I didn't waste time. "We need to talk." Brad frowned. "About what?" I exhaled slowly. "Jessica." His entire body tensed. "Just for a second." Then he scoffed. "Yeah, no thanks. I don't feel like getting my ass kicked tonight." He started to shut the door. I caught it before it could close. "I'm not here to fight," I said evenly. "I'm here to tell you the truth." Brad hesitated. I could see the conflict in his face, the part of him that wanted to slam the door in my face to avoid whatever this was going to be. But curiosity won. "Fine," he muttered, stepping back. "Make it quick." I walked in. The place was a mess. Empty takeout containers on the coffee table, clothes thrown over the couch, a game controller half buried under a pile of junk mail. Brad sat down with a grunt, rubbing his temples. "All right, man. Say what you gotta say." I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward him. Jessica's messages. Every single one. I watched as Brad's face twisted. Confusion at first, then disbelief. Then, slowly, the color drained from his face. His jaw clenched. His fingers curled into fists against his knees. "This," he exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "This has to be fake." I didn't even flinch. "It's real." Brad stared at the screen, his leg bouncing, his eyes scanning over each message like he was waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one, because this was real, and he had been the punchline all along. "She used me?" His voice was quiet, stunned. I nodded. "Yeah." Brad let out a breathless laugh, running both hands through his hair. "Jesus Christ." I stayed silent, letting it sink in, letting him sit in the same humiliation I had felt for months. "She told me she cared about me," he muttered, his voice tight. I folded my arms. "She told me she loved me." Brad swallowed hard. "And the whole time? She was laughing at you?" I said bluntly. "At both of us." His nostrils flared. He shot up from the couch, pacing across the room, hands tugging at the hem of his hoodie like he needed something to hold on to. Then he froze. And when he turned back to me, his face was unreadable. "Does she know you're here?" I smirked. "Oh yeah." Brad exhaled through his nose, a slow, controlled breath. "Good." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" He cracked his knuckles. "Because now," he said darkly, "it's my turn." Brad wasn't the sharpest guy in the world, but in that moment, I saw something in him I hadn't expected: rage. Not the blind, drunken kind. Not the performative, fake tough guy kind. The cold, focused kind. The kind that came from realizing you'd been played for a fool. And Jessica had played him hard. He stood there, breathing slow, hands curled into fists at his sides, processing the same kind of betrayal I had gone through. But unlike me, he wasn't shocked. No, Brad knew he had been stupid. And that made him pissed. "How long?" he asked, voice tight. I shrugged. "According to Stacy? Months." Brad let out a slow, bitter laugh. "Figures." He dragged a hand down his face, shaking his head. "Jesus, man. I thought he stopped himself, swallowing hard. I didn't have to fill in the blanks. He thought she cared. He thought he mattered to her. And just like me, he was wrong." Brad suddenly grabbed his phone off the coffee table, his thumb moving fast across the screen. I frowned. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer. Just lifted the phone to his ear. A few seconds passed. Then, hey babe. My stomach twisted at the sound of Jessica's voice through the speaker. Sweet? Warm? So goddamn fake. Brad's jaw flexed. Hey, he said, his voice eerily casual. Where are you? I smirked. Oh, this is gonna be good. Jessica hesitated for a split second. Home. Brad looked right at me. And then he grinned. Funny, he said. Because your husband is standing in my living room. Dead silence. Then Jessica's breath hitched. She stammered. What? What are you talking about? Brad didn't even blink. Oh, come on, baby. Don't be shy now. He leaned back against the couch, stretching out his legs like he was enjoying this. Tell me, were you ever gonna tell me I was just your backup plan? Or were you gonna wait until you got bored and tossed me in the trash? Brad, no, seriously. I wanna know. His voice turned sharp. Was I just the idiot you used whenever you needed attention? Whenever you wanted to feel wanted? Jessica's breathing turned shaky. It's not like that bullshit. Brad's voice cut through the air like a blade. Jessica fell silent. I could practically hear her scrambling, trying to figure out how to lie her way out of this. But Brad wasn't me. He wasn't gonna let her talk in circles until she found an excuse that stuck. You really had me, you know that? He said, his voice softer now. More dangerous. I actually believed you. Thought I was special to you. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Turns out I was just a goddamn stand-in. Jessica sniffled. Oh, no way. I shot Brad a look, mouthing, she's about to cry. Brad rolled his eyes. Don't even start, Jess. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. I just, save it, he snapped. You didn't mean for it to happen? That's your excuse. He scoffed. Nah. You planned this. You coached your friends on how to cover for you. You laughed at me behind my back. You knew exactly what you were doing. Jessica let out a shaky breath. Brad didn't give her the chance. We're done, he said, voice like ice. Lose my number. Don't text me. Don't call me. Don't even think about me. You're dead to me, Jessica. Silence. Then Jessica's voice small. You don't mean that. Brad grinned. A slow, cruel grin. Oh, sweetheart, he said mockingly. I do. Then, without another word, he hung up. The second the call ended, he exhaled sharply and tossed his phone onto the couch. He dragged both hands through his hair, pacing the room, his whole body still radiating frustration. I just watched him, arms crossed. That felt good, huh? I mused. Brad let out a short laugh, shaking his head. Dude, you have no idea. I smirked. Oh, I think I do. We stood there for a moment. Two men who had been played, humiliated, tossed aside like we were nothing. And now, we were free. Brad sighed. So what now? I cracked my knuckles. Now, I said, we make sure Jessica never pulls this shit again. Brad grinned. Oh, he said, I'm in. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. No more doubts. No more second-guessing. No more lying to myself that Jessica was anything other than a selfish, manipulative snake. She had spent months making me feel like I was the problem. Like I was crazy for noticing the little inconsistencies in her stories, the subtle shifts in her behavior, the way she always had an excuse ready before I even asked a question. But now the game was over, and I was going to make sure she never played it again. I grabbed my phone and opened the group chat with Stacy, Rachel, and Emily. I had copied every single incriminating message, every cruel joke, every disgusting thing they had said about Brad. Then, with a satisfied smirk, I sent the screenshots to every single person they knew. Family, friends, co-workers, even their yoga instructor. Let them all see the truth. And then I made one last call. To Jessica's parents. Her dad picked up, his voice groggy. Hello. Hey, Mark. I said smoothly. You might want to sit down for this. By the time I got home that afternoon, Jessica was already there, waiting. She was pacing in the living room, her phone clutched in her hand, her eyes red and swollen. The second I stepped inside, she spun to face me, her face twisted with rage. What the hell did you do? She shrieked. I closed the door behind me, took off my jacket, and tossed my keys onto the table. Then, I turned to her, completely calm. Made sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Jessica let out a strangled noise, shaking her head furiously. You had no right. I scoffed. Oh, I had every right. She marched toward me, shoving my chest with both hands. I barely moved. You ruined my life. I smirked. No, you did that. Jessica let out a furious sob, her hands flying to her hair. My parents blocked my number. My friends won't even text me back. And work? She cut herself off, her breath hitching. I raised an eyebrow. What about work, Jess? She glared at me, chest heaving, her entire body trembling with rage. They put me on leave, she admitted, her voice breaking. HR said my behavior was inappropriate and unprofessional. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? I shrugged. Sounds like karma. Jessica's whole face contorted like she was physically in pain hearing that. I hate you, she whispered, voice shaking. I grinned. Right back at you, sweetheart. She sucked in a breath like she was about to launch into another screaming match, but before she could, a loud honk came from outside. Her Uber. Jessica clenched her jaw so hard I thought her teeth might crack. Then, without another word, she grabbed her suitcase, the one I had so kindly packed for her, and stormed toward the door. I didn't stop her. I didn't say a single word as she stepped outside, slamming the door behind her. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, listening to the sound of her suitcase wheels scraping against the pavement. And when I heard the car pull away, I laughed. Because for the first time in years, I was free.